And so in the irony of all ironies, the exercise with the word upright in its name is the one most likely to leave you on your back. What's up guys, Jeff Cavalier, ATHLEAN-X.com. What you see behind me is a bunch of different shoulder exercises, many of which you probably recognize because you've either done them in the past or you're still doing them today. However, after today's video, you're going to want to get rid of a few of them. You see, I'm going to rank them from the worst to the best to leave you with only the best shoulder exercises that are going to deliver you the gains that you're after. And so as we begin the ranking process here, it's important to define the criteria upon which the exercises are ranked. And while progressively overloading an exercise to develop strength is an important element of all the exercises, it's not the main criteria for how we select these. We're looking for hypertrophy, we're looking for muscle growth, and the ability of these exercises to do that is going to be the main reason for why we rank them in the order we do. That being said, we always have to rely on the safer options, and when it comes to the shoulder, the most mobile joint in the body, unfortunately along with that mobility comes some sacrifices to our stability. With the lack of stability comes some poor exercise choices, especially if you're going to repeat them for years to come. We're not talking about being able to get away with one rep or even a few workouts. I'm talking about year after year after year of doing these exercises. That has to be part of the equation. We're going to want to mitigate those injury risks and leave you with the better options that are still going to be able to produce the gains. However, unlike anything else we've done in the series before, we're talking about a different setup here when it comes to the shoulder. We have three distinct heads: the front head, the middle, and the rear delt. We want to give you the best rankings for each of those heads, and of course, I'm not going to overlook the fact that we want just overall shoulder development. I'm going to even give you some bonus rankings for those too. With that being said, let's just start off what we always do in this series, and that's at the bottom, and just work our way up because it can only get better from there. And I'm going to start with the worst of the worst, the upright row. There's a saying out there that says there's no such thing as a bad kid, just bad parents. But luckily when it comes to exercises, there's no family tree that we have to worry about. And the upright row is just a bad exercise. Now I know a lot of people will defend that and say there's no such thing as a bad exercise either, but I disagree. Every single rep of an upright row places your shoulder into an internally rotated position with elevation. Yes, the exact position that you would test somebody in if you were looking for impingement. When the biomechanics of the exercise itself are literally fighting your own body's anatomy, I just can't wrap my arms around the exercise and love it. I don't care if you get away with it in a single workout or even a training block or even 15 years of training with the exercise. Over time, you're likely going to run into a problem. And while yes, the exercise can be improved slightly by lowering the height of the barbell or dumbbells when you lift them up, the fact is there's better exercise options that can achieve the same thing and do a better job at it with lower risk. For that reason, the upright row gets the first red X. All right, so I mentioned that there's no family tree when it comes to exercises, but if there was, the Cuban press would be the evil twin brother of the upright row. As a matter of fact, maybe even more evil. And that's because we're adding another element to an already bad biomechanical exercise. You see, when we lift this up, we're getting external rotation, which some would argue makes this a good exercise, but it really isn't, because you're lifting yourself up there from an internally rotated position. Not to mention, the best part about this exercise is probably the press, because you've got your elbows at least in a somewhat forward position. However, the real dangers happen when you start to lower the dumbbells. And you're getting into this eccentric internal rotation again, but even worse, you've got to increase moment arm with those dumbbells further away from the chest, making this just more harmful to the shoulders than even the upright row. And for that reason, this also gets the next big red X in this category. Speaking about the press, can we talk about the version we all started out doing the first time we ever trained shoulders? The behind the neck press? Look, I did it too, for another reason that I saw it in Arnold's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding, and it looked pretty damn good. Once again, doing this variation of the press just puts our shoulders in a position where we're fighting our own anatomy. There's something called the scapular plane, which is a 45-degree angle or so in front of our body so that the elbow doesn't have to track back behind our body like it does in a behind the neck press. There is nothing wrong with an overhead press, as you're going to see here later on in this video. But when we do it from this position, you're placing yourself in an unnecessary injury risk that we could do from a better position without sacrificing any of the gains that we should be getting from the exercise. So for that reason, as always, the details matter. And in this case, the positioning of the shoulders too far back makes this one that I would also throw in the bottom of the barrel category. All right, so if you haven't picked up on this by now, as a physical therapist, I don't like internal rotation of the shoulder from an elevated arm position for obvious reasons. That being said, there's one exercise that can make me go from loving it to hating it just like that. It's this exercise right here. It's the side lateral raise, but done from the pour the pitcher position. You might have heard this tip before, that when you get to the top of a lateral raise, you want to act like you're pouring pitchers of water and have your thumb pointing down and your pinky pointing up. If you notice what's going on right there, yes, you've got internal rotation from an elevated arm position. That being said, when you realize you can get the same activation and benefits to the middle delt by simply leaning forward a little bit and keeping your thumb higher than the pinky to ensure that you have external rotation at the shoulder, you're still going to place that middle delt in that direct line of the downward force of gravity, still making it do all the work without sacrificing anything from the exercise, just increasing the safety of it. Save the pitcher pouring for something you do down here maybe at table level, and save your shoulders in the process by putting the PTP side lateral raise in the big red X category. And with that, I now get to break out my blue marker as we work our way up the rankings, this time to the better category, where we're talking about good, solid exercises, and specifically hitting the front, middle, and rear delt in that order. When we start with the front delts, and the exercise here is the press out. And while this is a good exercise for targeting the front delt, there are definitely some built-in limitations here, namely the lack of range of motion. We're not taking the weight from our thighs all the way up in an arc to end in this position. We're kind of shortcutting it by starting at our chest and simply ending in a position that we expect to end in when we're targeting our front delts. There's better options here that won't be as limited, but I do believe this is a good entry point exercise for those looking to target the front delts, and that's why the press outs get the first in the better category. Sticking in the better category, now working our way around to the middle delt, the exercise of choice here is the cheat lateral. And I've mentioned the merits of this exercise before many times on this channel. It gives us an opportunity to use a weight that we may not always be used to using here if we're strictly limiting ourselves to light weights on a lateral raise, but at the same time, that introduces some eccentric overload stresses that we know are good drivers of muscle hypertrophy. However, with this comes oftentimes some extra momentum, and with the momentum comes some muscle substitution. But if we're considering all aspects here and realizing that the momentum and muscle substitution could be taking away from our ability to focus and drive our intention through the middle delt, then we realize here that we've done a good job of selecting an exercise, but not the best yet, and that's why it belongs in the better category for now. Which brings us to the last of the better category, and this time wrapping all the way around to the rear delt. You do train your rear delts, don't you? The exercise in focus here is the reverse fly. This might be the most common exercise people perform when they're trying to target the rear delts. Unfortunately, as I covered on this channel before, it's certainly not the best. And the main limitation here is the range of motion. You see, when you're trying to target the rear delt, the main thing you can try to do is get extension of the arm back behind the body. It's not just about abducting the arm away from you as if you're doing a side lateral raise bent over. It really is about getting that arm back behind the body. And if you use even just a little bit more weight than you can handle here, the range of motion is going to be limited even more. It's a good exercise. It does work the rear delt, no doubt, but it's not the best at its ability to do so. And for that reason, we're going to put this one in the better category when it comes to the rear delts. And with that, we continue our way up the rankings to the better still category, and I break out my yellow marker to put our focus once again back on the front delt, and here we're looking at the Arnold press. Now look, I realize that Arnold's become a little bit of a polarizing figure these days, but there's one thing I think we all could agree on: the guy knew how to build muscle. And the front delt exercise of choice that he used got your elbows out in front of your body because it demanded that you start with your hands facing your body. And if you followed along to this point, one of the reasons why I didn't like that behind the neck press was exactly due to the elbow positioning. This is getting that problem fixed by getting your arms out in front of your body. However, as with all shoulder press variations, it's tough to limit the gains to just the front delt. When we realize that we have better options for targeting the front delt more effectively, we can see why this gets the better still nod, but still not best in this category. And continuing here in the better still category, we now shift our focus once again to the middle delt. And here we're taking a step up from the cheat lateral raise with something called the abduction row. What it's doing is it's still allowing us to use the heavier weights that the cheat lateral might, but it's allowing us to do it with a more focused contraction. Not necessarily solely on the middle delt, which is impossible anyway, but it does include more of a contraction at the top, which is something we didn't really have control over with the cheat lateral. The way we're accomplishing this is with a different set of substitution muscles. As opposed to letting the upper traps kick in, we're actually able to turn this into more of a rowing motion, hence the name, which introduces some of the upper back muscles, most notably the rear delt, which is going to help us to get this heavier dumbbell up to the top. Because the movement is still driven with abduction of the elbow away from the side, you're still going to get those immense benefits in terms of creating a stimulus for growth for the middle delt. Think of it like 20% row, 80% abduction, and when you do, you're going to have 100% of a good exercise option when it comes to creating better middle delt growth. All right, I have to admit, this one stings a little bit. Can we just get it out of the way? Look, it's not often that we conclude any list of the best exercises without face pulls ranking all the way at the top. But when it comes to rear delt exercises, it's a really solid option, but it's just not the best. I know, a dagger. However, let's take a look at why. The face pull is, as I've said many times on this channel, one of the best exercises you could do, and one you should probably do at the end of every single workout you do, because we simply do not get enough attention to the posterior chain and the muscles of the upper back and mid-scap that this exercise does a great job doing. But therein lies the problem, the upper back and mid-scap. throw in the rotator cuff, and you've got a lot of other muscles doing the job, not just the rear delt, which limits this to being the best rear delt driver. However, the face pull is always going to appear in a list of great exercises, but for the rear delt, it's a better still, just not the best. Whew. All right, that wasn't so bad. And so with that, we now continue to work our way up the rankings. This time I get to break out my green marker for the almost best category. So not quite at the top yet, but really damn good. And for this, for the front delt, we're going back to the press, and this time it's the scoop press. You see, the scoop press has some very unique advantages over the Arnold press, namely an increased range of motion and focus on the front delt. So you can see that when we start the exercise, we lock in by getting a fixed 90-degree position at the elbow. You're not going to open that angle at any point thereafter because we're not going to turn this into a bicep exercise. Keep it locked in here, and you're going to scoop your arms up to that front rack or shoulder pressing level and continue to press up overhead. We still have all the benefits of the elbows out in front of our body that we do on the Arnold press, but we're getting the additional range of motion on the first half of the exercise that's still actually allowing us to utilize a heavy load because of the bent arm position and the closeness of the dumbbells to our body. This exercise is a better pressing option when you're looking for better exercises, and it's the reason why it belongs in the almost best category. And that brings us to the next exercise here, this one focused on the middle delt, and for this one going back to the side lateral raise in the almost best category. I know what you're saying, Jeff, you always do this. You say one thing's bad, and the next day you say it's good. No, actually, guys, as always, the details matter. Did you realize that one word could actually change the entire meaning of a sentence? Like I could say, you make me really hard, or I could say, you make me really laugh hard. See, it's a big difference. When it comes to the side lateral raise here, as I mentioned before, the details matter a lot because this becomes a great exercise in this spot. When we're looking for targeted middle delt growth, we want to lighten up the weight here and focus on the middle delt. And we can do it in a much safer position by forgetting about pouring those pitchers. Instead, get that thumb higher than the pinky at the top. Lean forward just a bit to make sure, as I mentioned before, to keep that downward force of gravity squarely focused on the middle delt, making it do all the work. Go through the exercise at a slow but steady pace, and this one becomes one of your best options when you're looking to create hypertrophy, and it's one that needs to be in almost every shoulder workout when that's what you're after. This is where the side lateral raise gets its position here in the almost best category. And wrapping up the almost best category, now we turn our attention to the backside again, the rear delt, and for this I'm looking at the hip hugger. And this one gets its name from the position of the dumbbells as you do the exercise. You should look like you're trying to pick up a pair of pants that kind of drop down too low. Now, if you look at the mechanics of the exercise, the one thing that's in place here that's really important is the good extension of the arm back behind the body. Remember, you don't have to lift your arms out to the side and keep them long to get them into a position behind your body. You can use heavy weights here. As a matter of fact, you're going to need to use heavier weights here to make this a main driver of growth. However, we can limit some of the contribution of those upper back muscles that the face pull wants to contribute by focusing more on pulling back with the elbows rather than straight up, which would turn this into a shrug. If you get the mechanics of this right, guys, I promise you one of the most intense rear delt contractions you've ever felt, and it's one that definitely belongs in the almost best category and one that you definitely need to start doing if you want to see the best results. And so we've reached the top of the top, the best of the best, but we've got not one but three winners here, one for each head of the delts, and we start right here at the front delts with the dumbbell front raise. And when we perform this exercise with dumbbells rather than a straight bar, we have the opportunity to split the hands up and do them in alternating fashion, one arm at a time. This affords us the benefit to get a really strong focus on the muscle we're trying to build and focus on getting a good contraction. At the same time, letting the front delts do what they do best, flexing the arm out in front of our body. There's no need to take the arms all the way up overhead because that just starts to introduce additional work being done by the upper and lower traps. Not what we're really focused on here when front delt growth is your goal. Guys, this is the best of the best when it comes to the front delt, and it gets the first green star or whatever the hell that shape is. And so that brings us to the middle delt, and again, the best of the best in this category, and you're not escaping some variation of a side lateral raise, except my favorite is when we do it with a cable lateral raise. And here you can see that actually making a small adjustment here that makes this even more effective. The cable setup allows me to get the main missing element from the side lateral raise, which is a stretch on the middle delt in the starting position. Think about it, unless you're performing the dumbbell lateral raise on an incline bench with your arm dropped in front of your body, you're never getting your arm into a stretch position on the middle delt and therefore not getting the best contraction you can get. When we do the cable lateral raise, we're starting every single rep from a maximal stretch position, which is going to allow you to do this even better, making it a better overall exercise when it's the middle delts that you want to grow, and therefore it too gets that big green star or odd shaped whatever for putting it in the best of the best. And so if the reverse fly did a good job of getting that horizontal abduction and the hip hugger did a good job of getting that extension that we're looking for, Well, what if we married the two? Again, back to the family aspect of this, well, we would get the rear delt row. And what this does is it takes a lighter weight for sure, but it gives us a chance to focus on getting the abduction of the shoulder away from the body, but also more extension. And what we do is we actually supinate the hand a little bit, which allows us to create some external rotation at the shoulder, which will allow us to get our arm into extension behind the body a lot easier, creating an overall better exercise. Just like raising your arm up overhead is easier with the hand turned out rather than turned in, we get the same benefit here, and the end result is we have a better contraction and an overall great exercise option for hitting our rear delt. It's getting the best designation here when it comes to the rear delt shoulder exercises. But what if you're just looking to build bigger shoulders overall, you're on a minimalist approach, and you want to know what exercises are going to do the best overall job of giving you the best bang for your buck? Well, at that point, guys, you're going to want to look to some of the presses. And in this category, they're all really, really damn good. You see, we have things like the barbell overhead press, the Z press, the modified Bradford press, the dumbbell overhead press, and the handstand push-up. And they're all good options. Each one, of course, have its own benefits. Like for instance, the barbell overhead press, while being a great opportunity to really, really load heavily, does have a restriction for those people that have some shoulder issues because of the fixed hand placement on the bar that gets freed up when you switch to the dumbbell version of the overhead press. The modified Bradford press gives those guys that are still in love with doing the behind the neck press a secondary option. If you notice, the elbow positioning remains in front of the body, which is why we call it a modified Bradford, never going back behind the body, so keeping your shoulders safe, but limiting the range of motion for those that have a difficult time pressing all the way up overhead. The Z press is just an option for building up the overall strength of your entire shoulder when you eliminate your legs from the equation in the seated position. You build your strength up here, and you take it back to a standing variation of a press, and I promise you, bigger strength gains and bigger overall shoulders if you do so. And finally, the handstand push-up. If you just don't have any access to weights at all, but you don't want to compromise your shoulder growth, the handstand push-up is a great exercise for targeting all three heads of the delts, and you can do it with simply a wall in your own body. All of these exercises are great options when it comes to shoulder developers, and though none of them are great specialists necessarily, they're all incredibly powerful when it comes to packing on mass to your shoulders, and therefore ones that you don't want to overlook. And there you have it, guys. With the rankings of these shoulder exercises now complete, you have a better idea of what exercises you should be focusing on and maybe which ones you can kind of do without. The fact is, guys, when it comes to exercise selection, the details matter as always. If you're looking for a program where the details always matter, make sure you head to ATHLEAN-X.com and check out our ATHLEAN-X programs. If you found the video helpful, if you like this series, tell me what you want me to cover next and I'll do that for you. And also make sure you click subscribe, turn your notifications so you never miss a new video when we put one out. All right, guys, see you soon.